these are the standards, and then we can also look at what our standards are. That was basically, are.
Well, obviously everything changed, right?
Right.
So John, you live in Philly? You're gonna move out this way?
I think that's.
You're like right up to the edge of the borough, but not in it? You don't wanna be, I don't need to be recognized. That's terrific. Yeah, hopefully you can join us in the borough somewhere.
Yes, gotta say.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Gotta wear this, wear a disguise. Yeah.
This is terrible. And then is the pilot work. Right, yeah.
Just Daryl or honorary girl, something
He's an alternate.
Yeah.
He's high on when I, bow out or, I'm sure you're not gonna not.
Yeah. Well, I think you attend every meeting, don't you? Everybody? Councils and all.
Story.
Nice, nice.
No.
Steve, how are you? All right, so we got waiting for Alex, Jason, and or Alan. Alan had knee surgery, so chances are low that he's here but Jason, I would expect. I'll give it another minute. I'm not sure. It was knee surgery, so I think after that, I asked him, I offered whatever you needed. I'll send, Steve will be over. Yeah. No, I asked him if he needed anything done around or anything, if he needs help physically. So I don't know. I'm assuming he does.
I think he doesn't have some children living in Westchester. It's actually California. Definitely in California, yeah, but I want to say that, it's gone.
Yeah.
When he's part of Chicago, he's California. Obviously, he would sound one of the things not much about.
So Ramsey, can I ask a couple questions here relative to recording or anything? Is there anything we need to do to get it started or
Yes.
that just happens automatically?
No, it
You don't
doesn't.
have to. Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
So there's just a few steps, and once we figure it out, like consistently, we'll put a step by step so that you guys have access to it. I
Okay.
created a boards and commissions Teams account so that you won't have to, it'll be logged in for you. Not into, I think Sean at one point has, he's recording.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, some staff accidentally have left their stuff logged in and then
Okay,
their emails have been up there. So
okay.
one strictly for boards and commissions, so you guys are one of the first.
Fantastic. All right. I'm going to.
He's good, he just moved here, here,
Okay,
yeah, so.
okay, we're,
If we get that far.
No.
What do you want? we're gonna get it, you want it in underneath the old business to continue that?
Yeah, okay.
We'll put it under the old business? We do. We only have like three things that need action, so. And then I'm not sure, because Jason said he was gonna do the build too, then he disappeared. So, we might be skipping past that one again, and then I'm gonna give him a call and maybe see if it's helpful.
4 days. And then staying able to go back full time.
What do you think, Matt? Give it another minute. We got four. We do have four. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. We have four here presently. We hope to see another one or two. Okay, today is April 29th, Tuesday. It's the voting session of the Westchester Borough Planning Commission. It's 6:32. Today we have Matt Clapp, Thomas Doherty, Steve Mitten, and myself, Jim Cherry. Announcements. Well, biggest announcement is we have a new Director of Building Housing. John Redmond's here. So John, you're going to be with us every month. Hopefully move into the area and you're able to have a shorter commute back and forth. But so anyway, welcome to the borough and to the Planning Commission. And we're super excited to have you. And Ramsey, what a team that's gonna be. We're not letting her go. So, but anyway, just offer, anything that we can help you out with, any resource, any questions, we'd be glad to do and participate in, but, look forward to seeing you here in the borough and add some stability and leadership over there in that, department, so.
Do you have can we hear a story?
I would love to hear one.
Sure. Is there something that you're excited about, specifically about Westchester and the role that you play? I don't know, just anything specific you're excited to be working here in the borough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know my background, I know from licensed inspections, it's about 15 years, I started as a code enforcement. I did pretty much the lowest, you can, at the department, I worked myself up to, code specialist, supervisor, and then I worked with the code administration and as a senior code administrator, so a lot of that, with some code development, and I worked for Boston Investigation Unit, which was mandated new unit by city council to help for the underground economy and get contracted more fully defined, so I guess that's any permits. So in that potential time at L and I entertained numerous reasons. Really now paid my master's because so I devoted myself to this career and this is where I'm at in the industry.
Great, well, welcome.
Thank you.
And so that's an important role, but it is probably, building and zoning has more on the day-to-day effect of the fabric of the borough, the character of the borough.
If it's not permanent, if it's building, it's not everything. It's the inside joke, it wasn't up to the big department.
Fantastic. Well, this is Jason Burrow. He's
Hi, how are you?
a longtime resident. That's yes. No, we're in announcements, so
Oh,
we started without you, sorry.
that's fine. No,
So,
we'll see.
yeah, John is the new director of building and housing.
Oh, hi, John.
Enforcement for the borough.
All right.
So, yeah, could you start that over for Jason?
Yeah, we got the recording.
So good news.
Yeah, we got the
Now,
recording.
let me ask you a question. Do you think we need one of these mics over on this side?
So this is just a test.
That's why I was wondering if you want to distribute.
Tell me, talk one at a time, which I think we're actually doing, and then we'll review this after and see what we need to do in between the next meeting.
Okay, fair enough.
I think people probably-
It's a microphone, hold on.
Okay.
There's a microphone on the floor in the middle, and you put it back on the table near John.
There you go. Now you gotta get to it.
That someone was flexible enough to.
All right.
Yes, cheating. Step over the table. Good. Yeah. Okay,
Where's the camera? I feel like it's under.
yeah, I think it's
Hunger
up here
Games or
somewhere.
something.
I think it's on the TV.
Above the TV.
Oh, got it.
The one we know
If
about.
this is not your good side, you can switch sides of the table.
Yeah, I might want
Yeah,
to. I might want to sit there and face this one.
Okay, are there any citizens' comments on items not on the agenda? Hi, Robert. No, nothing? Okay, very good. So at the, next, we're moving on to reports, which was, we discussed a little bit last week. It was the green building checklist that Will Williams, the Director of Sustainability, had presented. And basically, it's a requirement for the height overlay districts to satisfy the green or sustainable building checklist. There was one that had been in place. It was 47 questions, pages long. That again was only one of the conditions. One of the other ones we'll discuss in a little bit, which was the historic review by the Historic Architectural Review Board. And Will and his team had kind of condensed and provided maybe 8 or 9 questionnaire, a much shorter one. And that guy kind of gave us some time and some opportunity to discuss what the goals were and what he was trying to achieve, and if we had any comments or ads. I think the general consensus was the intent was good. I think there was, from my standpoint, a question on not only the phrasing of some of these questions, some questions were two questions in a question. And I was trying to make it or tie it into something a little more objective and defensible by the borough, something that was a little, I guess, measurable. One of the things I wanted to talk about relative to it was that the ICC or the IBC has a system in place that actually allows designers to confirm compliance with the energy code. And it's called ComCheck or ResCheck, depending if it's a commercial building or a residential building. So there are two ways to approach the design of the building. One is prescriptive and one is performance. So if you were just to follow the building code and provide the type of insulation the wall cavity requires, the type of insulation, maybe the roof, the performance out of windows, if you were just to comply with the building code, that in essence would be the prescriptive method. And if you ran it through a LEED checklist, you would come up with a silver LEED certificate. The other way is a performance-based, which allows the opportunity for existing conditions or new conditions to maybe, say, for instance, the building is a glass building, and you're saying, how are these people making it? Well, they might add more insulation to the roof. So then when you run the calculations, it levels it back out and gives you an equivalent performance rating, meeting or confirming the compliance with the energy codes. So one of the thoughts I had after we left that building was maybe we look at that performance, the ComCheck, and have a requirement that the applicant exceeds the performance by 10%, as just using it as a number. That is not an unheard of approach. The PHFA uses that in their building design. So tax credit developments or affordable housing developments that go through that process are required to exceed the code performance by 10% if they want to get certain kinds of fundings. They don't have to, but that promotes things like Enterprise Green or Energy Star, some of the a little more stringent performances out of a building. So it's above and beyond just how Will might have stated as a code minimum. But I just thought that was a very measurable approach. It was objective. It was tied to the building code. And within ComCheck, it would provide a data sheet when you would able to put in all those numbers. You can measure for certain pieces, lighting, electrical, building envelope, mechanical systems. My recommendation based on this one was that it's done for the building envelope. For the building envelope kind of snowballs through. The more efficient that envelope is, the less energy you use. It does not necessarily dictate, but in order to meet or exceed, you're most likely going to provide electrical, like a electric as a base for the heating and cooling systems. There could be other things that could be added into it. As an example, maybe the borough adds something to say, hey, if you design this roof to accommodate solar panels down the line, even if it's not right away, but allow it to be solar panel ready, maybe that gets some points or something. So there's things maybe outside of that. But the whole point here, when I read through this, there was a lot of yeses and nos and hard to understand how that would be received or quantified.
Well, so wait, is the purpose of this to support this ICC like checklist and potential funding, or is this just
No.
for us to collect for?
This is in response to, if you look at our height overlay districts in 60 and 75, I'm gonna go find the sections.
Okay.
All right, in in chapter 112, 402, okay? And that one, 402 is for the height overlay 75, height option overlay district.
Yeah.
Within that, there's a section, the section down B, that says, in order to increase the height of a building, other structure, or any portion thereof from 35 feet up to 75 feet, the following standards and criteria shall be followed. Okay, one of those, presently item number 6, was the conservation performance standards. Within that, it said all new buildings over 35 feet shall be designed, constructed, and maintained at a minimum to earn and comply with the gold certification level based on the standards for such certification included in the document attached hereto as Appendix A, titled Westchester Sustainable Certification Program, which is hereby adopted as part of this chapter and incorporated herein by reference. So it is a document standalone that has to be responded to or provided by the applicant. So the idea of maybe simplifying or at least grounding that is certainly a fair enough of one. All right, so if we read through what Will did, Will's committee did, was they took that previously approved and adopted list. They were not getting a lot of, my understanding was individuals filling it out might not have had some of the information at the time.
They were having a tough time filling it out.
So I don't know if, I think my understanding was that they just wanted to simplify it, but they also, the
Okay.
sustainability committee is also interested in understanding at this point what we can mandate, what we should incentivize, because we have standards set by council for 2030 and then.
Sure.
Well,
So
I also ask another question. What's more important, building height, as keeping a height level that, as opposed to, I don't know how tall they can get if they can check off of a list, right? Or sustainability. And so how hard do we want to make this list to actually conform to get the benefits that outweigh letting these buildings be taller?
Right. And I think that was the other question here too, is like, if this is just the HO 60 and HO 75, like, or because Will did say that they do it for all development, even if it's not in those areas, they are
Right.
reviewing it, but compliance, and then also what are we getting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Correct. So presently it's required in just the height overlay districts. And then the question was asked, how do we scale that up or across the entire borough? How would it apply?
Mhm.
And so, and that's why I was proposing what I was proposing, because the building code has that. So I don't know if you have access to the internet and you can, I don't know, do you have a ComCheck account, Jason?
Oh, yeah.
And maybe just
I don't know.
show.
I don't know.
So, and that's why I'm saying if.
Well,
we-
before we even go there,
Mhm.
I'm not. Okay. Uh,
There were 2 questions there, so we're both.
yeah, but I don't know if I'm gonna kill that. Okay, doesn't matter.
Okay.
Figure it out. Where'd it go? So this is in the HO 75.
Correct.
Which is is it also an
It's
HO
the same
60?
in HO 60 as
Okay.
well. And then.
Okay, so we have to meet the gold standard or whatever
Right. And that
gold
is,
certification level based on the standards of such certification included in the document. What does that even mean?
It sounds like
Right.
Westchester
It's
set
right.
the gold standard.
well,
So,
Westchester,
yeah,
so they're up on the screen too, Jason, if you want to go to the second.
Yeah. So okay, so
So we can
that's
help,
for the old.
Yeah, if you could put them up on the screen so
Yeah.
everyone else can see. So this is the old, this is the one that's in place presently.
So then. If you meet the energy efficiency,
and you
whatever the points are, then you can go over 35 or 45 feet.
build it taller.
Correct.
Well, it's.
Well, that's just one of them.
One of the things.
So this was, as an example, this was items number 6. The other 5 have to be met as well. So this is one of the conditions that the borough has set in order to incentivize some types of, I'll just say, a greener development or a more energy efficient development. So if you're going to do that, it requires it to go, and that's why I'm saying above and beyond the code requirement.
Yeah.
So, and it's achievable, but it does require you to build a more permanent and substantial building. that performs in a way that would be better in the long run for the borough.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I just think, I mean, I'm just learning about this, but
Sure.
my thought is, don't make the survey so easy to fill, again, I get it that, like,
You wanna
we still want people to hit a gold standard, like, we don't want to just, because people haven't been filling out the survey, right? That, or they haven't been able to fill it out
Yeah.
completely, we don't want to just make it easier so that they potentially could make a building taller.
Well, this is,
Well,
this
who's
is,
assigning the?
Because a
points
lot of
again?
people, as you know, people
Yeah.
kind of push back against tall
that's why.
buildings too, so it's not like the residents are gonna be like, oh,
But this is new ones.
Exactly.
One of the issues that we talk about the other night is that some of these lead and environmental
Mhm.
point systems, it becomes relatively game, the system.
Yeah,
So,
Mhm.
lots of stuff,
Yeah.
what's the most sustainable, environmentally friendly building? It's the existing buildings. Most of our, you can get LEED gold or LEED whatever platinum by knocking down the historic structure that's gonna last for a while and putting up the mostly glass structure with like rock, whatever.
Mhm.
So they're not great at achieving the goals that they're aiming for. And so that was part of the conversation, is that we always get this thing filled out by the big, when
When they just say-
street or whatever. I see it in the document, and it's just kind of a kind listing. And so I think the intent was in part to make it a little bit more ambiguous so that Will and others could give a report to you that was not simply they scored this on the point system, but it was more, it was a little more ambiguous to allow them to delve into, is this really achieving the goal that
Right.
they were aiming for?
Right.
So that was part of his explanation.
Right, and I think it's fair enough it would be
Probably
fair enough. But it would be fair enough to look at Will's questionnaire, because it's not his. It was over a year's worth of time with his committee, and they posed these questions. Some of them though, and I'll just use one, here's a couple. Is the existing building oriented and designed to utilize advantageous solar gain for passive heating or solar PV? The bulk of the borough's on a grid, so that one's a tough one to even, I mean, you're a lot, and there's other things to consider. And like from an importance level, I'm gonna touch back on what Thomas said. Preservation is highest in at least a couple of our minds of what we'd like to see. So
Make that an extra category, like preservation is sustainability, right? So.
it is, there's a lot of,
Do it.
there's
The
a,
most important part of it.
Right.
there's a lot of stored energy in existing buildings, and actually restoring them or renovating them is great recycling, all right? It's great, it's a great starting point. So, and it also, there's other components and other conversations relative to, I'll just say, attainable housing, that sometimes when you drive up requirements, that backhandedly drives up costs, that backhandedly gets passed on to the user. So it's just, so the idea here is, how do we get this thing and promote good development when it does happen, or good practices? So it's not just the brand new developments, it's even on existing ones. And that was the conversation last week, was most people in their, 100-plus-year-old home, maybe just looking at the windows, looking at the doors, looking at the roof insulation, those kinds of things might make for less energy use. And that's something that's achievable by a homeowner. But we don't want someone to take out beautiful windows and slap up a white vinyl, a flat window. It's counter productive. There are solidly good clad windows. There are also higher end vinyls that would look a lot better. But going through HARB and looking at what they're reviewing, and sometimes you see things and decisions that are made. What we're trying to promote is just a continual care and preserving of the quality of what everybody loves about the borough, and continue.
And I think that,
growing
if I
that.
could,
Sure.
people often argue that the most important characteristic of sustainability is that love of it, right? Because you're going to care for and maintain that place that you find beautiful and the buildings that you love.
Mhm.
And that LEED Platinum building, if nobody's gonna like it, it's not gonna be as valuable, it's not gonna be preserved
taken care of. So that is a key aspect of sustainability. And if we wanted the reward to be something other than height, it could be something other than height. Exactly.
Right.
And we're going to talk about just that too.
Good, Steve. Yeah. And then,
The one thing about the energy code now, this checklist doesn't seem to make anything better. It's not helping the situation to try and, because anybody could say yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
And so then the other thing too is I feel like this is a little outdated, that part of the code, because the energy efficiency, the energy code now is so much stronger.
that was my point.
Exactly.
And we're gonna be adopting what's in New Jersey now, where it's like, I don't even know how we even achieve it, because it's so, the insulation values are so high.
Sure.
So I don't even know if we even need this, at least from a building envelope standpoint. The heating and cooling, ASHRAE is gonna cover that, and that's
Sure.
pretty onerous right now. And then, so then the other thing is, so these new buildings are gonna be way more energy efficient than they were 5 years ago when this was probably written, or 10 years ago. So
Well,
then the
this was
next,
just written.
and then the next, yeah, and then, so this is the only thing that's incentivizing a taller building, which nobody seems to really want tall buildings, which is a whole nother debate. But then what about all the other buildings that are less than 35 feet?
Mhm.
So
Right.
the energy code is taking care of that. So we don't even need a checklist for that. So in a weird way, I'm kind of saying the opposite of what I started with, was that this checklist is probably fine because it's making people aware of the big ticket items.
That was
But
what he
it's-
said.
Right.
That was basically.
Right.
Okay.
I think that was the
So it's not,
end result.
so in a way, it's fine. Because it's, why are we making people do a green checklist? And I'm all for all this, but why? Because you said they can game the system. When lead was really hot, it was really easy. A lot of it, was construction management stuff, and it was like, how are you,
Sure.
or within the radiuses and.
Sure. Well, that's,
So,
I think, the
I'm not-
example of having a glass building, but then you put a bike rack out front, they get to your point. So, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
and we-
So what's our task here?
That was the conversation. Well, our task was, Will brought this to us
Yeah.
to review and have a conversation as a starting point and maybe take a look and see what the planning commission thinks about this list. So, and I think whether we support it or not support it, or whether we think what's in place is fine, or whether we like to move to the new one. So where I wanted to continue the conversation was giving this some thought and reading some of these. Alex isn't here, but our English major there was talking about some of these are two questions in one. So, it like number 2, will the building be built to exceed current statewide energy codes or only meet PA code minimum? So both of those it's two different questions, but my concern as an individual was I didn't like, it was a very kind of biased, I don't want to say snarky or shaming type of a question. And mine is.
Well, they're all shaming.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But mine is, as a borough, I think we should be more objective and more focused on what's the goal and what's the goal of asking the question or allowing these things. So you're right, height of buildings are a whole different conversation. Preservation is a whole different one, and tying these pieces all together. I think it's fair enough to, I think Will's desire is good, if the intent is good. And I think everybody that's an easy one. I think that's easy to say that, but I also agree with what you're saying, Jason, is a lot of stuff that happens now in the codes was out of reaction to really bad decisions in the 70s. And it's so long before they've caught up and corrected, all right? So a lot of these things, and I'll just use LEED as an example, it's really just third party quantifying what's been done. So even if you didn't do it, you can do it yourself as a designer and say, hey, this is meeting it. And this is what I'm saying from the building code standpoint, you're required to build a very energy efficient building now. It's not a question. So then it's a matter of how does that, who's going to be following up on that and confirming that that in fact has been done. We're not out in the sticks, so we have somebody that's going to be keeping good eyes and on what's going on around the borough. So that we should feel very comfortable with. It's we're first world here in the borough, and I think that stuff's going to be in place. I do think it's fair enough to, though, say, to hear what Will's saying and respond to that. And I think the simplified list, my concern was how it was and how subjective or maybe biased it might have been. So in giving that some days of thought, I was like, there is actually an objective tied into the code, method, and that's comp check. So Jason, if you want to pull up comp check.
Well, I got one other question. So
Okay.
did Will say that in order for this to work, that he might not have been thinking about the HO 6075 part of this, but do all these items have to say yes in order for us to basically say we're meeting that condition?
Right, I don't know what the
I don't
grading
think
criteria
it's-
is. Yeah.
On
Well,
this.
here is a yes and no, that's the scoring.
They're all
system, right?
yes.
So do they all have to say yes, or do 50% of the things have
So
to
he
say?
said
Right.
that it was going to be a recommendation. Is in. So that's where, because I get where you're coming from, Jim, and so I'm gonna say this again.
It's actually better.
Last week, I do think that I wouldn't have written it like this, and I prefer the objective, but in my mind, it's more, I would think this looks great. It's more important to, confirm them and affirm what they're doing, say, yeah, go for it, because if they put a year into this, let's let them keep doing their thing.
Well, and that was,
So that was my 2 cents. I think it's better to just let them do their thing. This is a check mark for the HO 6075 that someone pushed for.
So for us, when we're reviewing a project that's asking for the height increase, then we would be looking at it and saying, okay, is the green
They do,
or whatever.
they're the ones that.
They're looking at it and they would be sending a letter to us saying, we recommend.
we should be
We,
getting a letter
we
from
think
them that
that,
says.
yeah,
that-
we think that they're
Yeah.
exceeding or they're doing
Right.
whatever they need to do to kind of
Yeah.
meet that condition.
Yes,
So
so,
Well, then, yeah, let them do it out.
Well-
list for you guys then
Well-
the real question is.
yeah, just to
Do
step
you
back,
want to be able, do you want this checklist to be driving your decision on whether or not
it's,
they?
well, it's just
can
one,
increase their
it's
height?
one of a handful, but just to go back to 1A, because I just may have glossed over that, or maybe I forgot to say it. 1A was, I wanted to see Tom Estee, the solicitors, have a read through this first and just give us his opinion because of how, and like I said, that was my concern. So that was being forwarded to Tom to review that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get his take on that. And then in light of that, so that was my step one. I think Thomas and I talked last week they spent that time over a year, developed all these things. If at the end of the day, what we're going to be receiving as a planning commission is a letter of recommendation on a building, that's all we're receiving. Okay. So that process in there, I'm not sure how you do or don't gauge some of these things based on the way the questions are formatted. But that's a conversation maybe they're having in committee with the applicant.
I-
And then deciding that they're approved. But that was my concern. Mine is, how is it measurable? What's one applicant say to another applicant? Somebody gets approved, somebody doesn't. So that's my concern.
There, which I think that they have not determined the scoring of it yet.
Mhm.
What Will would find helpful, like what Jason was saying about, some of these are already dealt with elsewhere, like maybe they don't know that, and I would say maybe these are unnecessary. I would each of you maybe go through the checklist and say, I don't, this is unnecessary, but also maybe as a team come up with preservation standards that might be helpful for sustainability. Also consider, do you only want this in the HO 60, HO 75? Is there a different way to incentivize sustainability across the board? I did reach out to Tom Estee. I forwarded him. I think I sent him your voicemail so he could think about that checklist, but then I forwarded him the 2 checklists and the ordinance to get his take on how heavy a hand you could have, how light of a
Sure.
hand, carrot versus stick. But I think the insight that Will wants from this group would be, how do you feel about the questions? Are they relevant? Are they irrelevant? Are there things that you should add? Do you want this elsewhere? Are there preservation standards that could help with your presentation and some of the zoning standards, and building in a different way based on green buildings, I think there's a very outside of the box approach to it that we, you guys would really have very good insight on, and I think Will is interested in that.
Sure.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that gives us homework too, so that, because we can talk about it forever. right?
Yeah.
Our homework is, let's print this thing off, come up with some thoughts, then we can.
And
discuss
look at
that.
the old one, maybe you like some of those
Sure.
questions, you know, but you guys might have better ones too.
I always kind of think, okay, so there's the sustainability, there's the green building checklist, which is in that, I forget the name of that group, commission or
Sustainability.
sustainability. So they have their own job to do. We have our job to do. So where they overlap is that we have conditions that an applicant comes in and they want to do a taller building. They have conditions. So it's building use. Us as the planning commission, did they do that? The parking, the lighting, the parking. So same way that tree commission, if the tree commission came and said, here's our checklist to see if an applicant has met the tree commission standards.
Mhm.
We can review it and kind of give them some opinions, but
Mhm.
but I wouldn't get too caught up in what that checklist is, because it's for the tree commission to do what they need to do, to send us a letter to say that they feel that this application meets the code for what they're reviewing. We're kind of there for the whole code. So then the same thing for the sustainability is, okay, we've come up, this sustainability committee has come up with this new way of looking at it, so they can send us a recommendation. I almost kind of think, kind of what I think you're saying is, if this is what they're coming up with, I actually think that it's fine, because in a way, I do like the way they're asking the questions, where when I said, oh, they're shaming, they're kind of making you think, okay, here, are you meeting the code or are you exceeding the code? And the question's a little bit, well, a little bit shamey,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that's, so then for condition 6, we would get a letter from the sustainability committee saying we believe the applicant has met this condition.
Right.
Which then we go,
Right.
okay,
Right.
and maybe we could discuss it separately again.
Sure.
But then it's like, okay, next item. So I actually think that list is fine.
Well, my problem was,
Yeah.
I read it, and then my problem was that is,
Yeah.
I really am concerned, and that's why I sent it to the attorney.
Yeah.
Right, because, and I think, to be fair to Will, he asked the question, and I think we owe him a response of some.
Yeah, sure.
So mine is, in the big picture, yeah, it's fine, I'll wait for a letter. At the same time, he's bringing this to us, and I think it's fair enough for us to say, hey, you know, there is something that's objectively measurable, and that you can, if the goal, which I believe it is, and is good, is to improve on the performance of a building, and even in excess of what's required by code, there's a method to do that.
Yeah.
And that is the performance through the COM check, all right?
Well, that's
So
already part of the code.
Com,
This is exceeding.
you can meet the COM check, but as an entity, you can say, hey, exceed it by 10%. Right, which you can do, which
Yeah.
then it's gonna require you to.
But you also know the com check's like a bunch of malarkey,
But it's, I'm just saying is, I would just use.
right? I mean, oh, that's,
Well,
I mean, I know you don't want to hear that,
I'm
but
not
come on, I mean,
Yeah.
we all know that, right? We do, here's your com
Hey,
check.
Jason, just as a reminder, being
Here's a
recorded.
com check. Are you really gonna? Yeah.
Yeah, well, my thing is, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my thing is, I think the goal's good. I think there's a vehicle out there that I just wanted to at least bring to their attention that says, hey, you know, this is available, and you might be able to do something like say, hey, exceed it by 10%. And as an example, the PHFA for some funding types does that.
Yeah.
And that's how you get the buildings. That's why they're building them enterprise green. That being said, my downside to that is you're not necessarily helping out the other committees that are looking for attainable housing, for preservation, for other pieces of it.
Yeah.
So getting too focused in on one piece, I think we stay in and do a better than average job on everything. We're better off than just really compromising quality or character and preservation for the sake of whatever, because no one's moving to Westchester because the solar panel field. I'm not sure if that's going to be the goal. Not that we don't have them in my neighborhood, but it is where it is. So my thought for it is, I see, Robert, you're looking to inch in there. I will allow you to speak there. So my point was, I was concerned with the questions.
Mhm.
So that was why Tom was he. And I wanted to at least provide some constructive feedback to Will, other than, yeah, we're good. because mine is, I think we could say that's the easy way out. I do though think when we read questions like number 4, will the building use heat pumps for water and space heating or less efficient technology? I think that's a very unfair question, and I'm not even sure that heat pumps are the most efficient form of
Yeah, I
heat.
was thinking that.
All right, so,
Yes or no to that?
well, that's what I'm saying. Most of these are that way. So
Oh.
that's what I'm saying is, and then.
No, you can answer yes or no. Yes, the building will use heat pumps or
Or less efficient.
Or less efficient technology.
so no.
So you're using-
No, it'll use a less efficient.
Right, but the thing
You
is,
would-
but what I'm saying is, in the Northeast,
Yeah,
in
they
this
use it-
region of the country,
I
it
know.
may or may not be the most efficient source, and I'm gonna say it's not, all right? So we should look at that,
Well,
of
for certain parts of the year.
right,
Yeah,
right, well, that's the problem with
yeah.
it.
Small
So
windows.
in the whole year, we're trying to get buildings to perform. It's like saying, hey, white roofs are the best. Well, they are farther south, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So maybe depends on your heating season
Yeah.
versus your cooling season, and so there's other
Yeah.
pieces that come in here.
Sure.
That just needs to be introduced into the conversation to say and understand. I get what you're saying, that everybody's goal here that designs buildings is on the same page. We're all trying to make more efficient, greener buildings.
Yeah.
It's been the emphasis for decades, all right? It's been a push and it's all parts and pieces of it. But we have to look at the whole borough holistically, how they all relate together. What are the other parts and means? How do they tie into the 150-year-old single family residents? How do they impact new developments? And are they in a good positive way? And is that there? The other one was, when I look at well, anyway, I've made my point. So Matt, I wanted to get to you because I didn't.
I think all the words have been said. I will say briefly that if I got a letter of recommendation based on this checklist from the Sustainability Committee, I wouldn't know what that meant because I don't think it's worded correctly and I think it's got gaps and it misses some
Mhm.
issues.
Mhm.
I don't think it's their job to look holistically. I think it's our job and Borough Council's job to do that. They need to focus on sustainability, adding preservation, adding some other areas, other issues would benefit this. I think we just need to but they're asking for our help and they're obviously looking for direction. And as the ones who are going to use their recommendation to then make a recommendation to Borough Council, I think it's in our best interest to help them out. So I agree with our proposed approach.
Okay.
I wonder if we could, to your point, Ramsey, if we, because now I'm thinking about it, I would be happy to write, like a short, just like a 1-page thing in response, because I would love to touch on some of these, preservation aspects, some of the
Sure.
aesthetic aspects of
Sure.
it. So I would be happy to write a
Okay.
1-page from my vantage point. I wonder if Will would benefit from anybody who wants to write in.
Yeah. So what I'd like to
I could say put it our thoughts in the minutes.
Well, what I'd like to do is have Will back again for the work session next month and have a conversation again. Because again, I felt like it kind of left us hanging. I felt like we had some time to think about it. I don't think everybody was necessarily here and had time to think about it or be able to, so I think I agree with, I like that. I like that and appreciate it. And then if, same thing, you want to,
My thoughts, I think, could be summed up in the minutes and it's.
Okay, fair enough.
I think
sure.
us as the planning commission should not be necessarily dictating or telling them what they need to do. They have their job. And then we're looking at one condition of many to be met.
Okay.
And if they're passionate about sustainability, I think they should have a checklist. I don't think that's necessarily the checklist, because I do
Mhm.
think there's some problems with it, but I think let them develop their own checklist so they can make their own recommendation, so my comment overall would be that there still needs to be work to be done. And I
Okay.
think all of our comments collectively will help them, will be the feedback to give them. So if you want to give them something separate, if you want to put in the minutes, but I think everybody else is kind of like Matt said, everybody else has kind of said,
And Jim, you had such great points.
yeah, that's everybody's got good points. Yeah, the one thing I would add that if this is a kind of a distilled thing, would be that there's nothing about water collection. There's about stormwater management and there's about water efficient fixtures, but there's nothing about water collection, which could be the same way solar can be used. They could be
Well,
collecting
yeah.
water to be using for.
I know what you're
diet or
saying. I
something.
mean, there's question number 1 on the bottom list under stormwater management.
Yeah,
I think those 3 are the ones that kind of address it.
No, they're talking about like collecting water.
Yeah.
So you're not you're not overwhelming the storm system.
Uh-huh.
But I'm talking about actually collecting water to use it for,
Like rainwater. Water
use it
plant.
for irrigation or something. So it's not even really necessarily leaving the site even
Mhm.
somewhat immediately, you know what I mean?
Sure.
In a controlled way. It's more like, it's a landscaping item or it's something like that.
Okay,
That's all. But that's my comments. But I think everybody's got comments.
sure.
That
That's
could
fair
be,
enough.
so if you wanted to do like an expanded essay, I think that's great, but I
Yeah.
get into the idea that there's a,
Do you have any comments? Not to put you on the spot, and you didn't get the back.
No, to get back up, but what I picked up on, it seems like, are you trying to incentivize a greener building by offering relief in the code, either whether it's height or more units or density? Is that basically what you're trying to do? I agree with Jason, it's sustainability's committee or program to say, yes, it either meets or exceeds what you're trying to get done, and then pass the recommendation off to you guys.
Okay.
And you make the decision either yes, you can have the incentives or not.
Okay, fair
Do you
enough.
still want those to be the incentive? Like, do we want
Well,
more tall buildings, more
No.
units?
no, that's
that's kind of a whole nother question.
Well, that was,
That's a whole other question.
well, that's,
But I
but
think I don't think you guys should get too caught up on the checklist, because I think that sustainability wants to understand what can we get out of this that isn't another
What-
stupid tall building.
Yeah,
well,
we-
no,
forgot.
yeah, but that gets it does get into a
Sorry.
it does get into a much more complicated conversation. Okay, because it gets very complicated really
Right.
quickly. So it's not as easy as I don't want a tall building. Because at the same time you go,
Yeah.
how do you bring the dollars down?
A tall building.
How do you
would
bring
be
the
more
cost
sustainable.
down?
Right.
And you say density, and you say, what's density mean? And you go, well, you can go out or up, all right? So which one's better? All right, so you're in a borough, 1.8 square miles, and we have no ground. Where's the incentive? How do you bring the house? So if someone was coming to us and saying, hey, I'm gonna be able to do a multifamily housing, but maybe we're saying this time, hey, maybe 30% of them are attainable or something. You're incentivizing things that are also promoting some of the other pieces, all right? And they're not stepping on the toes. There are other buildings that are more detrimental to the borough and the skyline that are different problem. Height is a tough one. 6 stories, 7 stories, what's the difference? I mean, you're walking along the street, they're both bad. They're both tall. I mean, I don't say they're bad. They're both high. And then there's things you can do. The higher you go, maybe you step away from the street. So there's floor area ratios or things that you can do to help allow the height increase. I'm sure you did that in Philadelphia.
Setbacks, yeah,
Right,
there's-
so that's how they allow and still preserve daylight down to the street level, so the street trees can still have a home. But so they're all tied together, so it's not fair to just say building height, was all my point, and it's much more complicated. I think nobody is saying, hey, we're doing this just so we can have taller buildings. I think presently the zoning allows for this height overlay district, and within that, there's at least 6 bullet points that have to be met in order for you to take advantage of that. This is one of 6. The other ones,
The silver bullet we're gonna talk about later is
Mhm.
the architecture.
sure.
Because we also farm some mechanics building. There are big, tall buildings aren't necessarily bad. But we've just been not enforcing a lot of things that need to be enforced. So if we can get somebody, it's been like, yes, Bernardin writes that they're following the hard guidelines. And we say, no, you're clearly not following the hard guidelines. But I think there's also been a disconnect between us and council, because one of the things that we don't do is we don't separate out the different things. And so overall, they're getting a yes, even though in the minutes it's saying, Borough Council, we need to address this because there's no gatekeeper on architectural guidelines, because we're not forcing them to go to Harvard, whatever.
Yeah.
So we are gonna talk about that next, and I do hope
Sure.
that's gonna,
Yeah.
that will have more effect than the environmental stuff
Mhm.
on the big building.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what came up last month, right? That first stop, that conversation. Okay.
Yeah, when there were a couple that we still have to follow up with you.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, any more comments? Robert, you had a hand, but
Yeah. Sounds from an outside perspective that maybe
Robert,
someone's a little hung up on the binary yes, no aspect of checklist, that kind of allows the receiver to kind of turn off the brain and say, it's a binary choice, yes or no. But I think that there's a value to having basically making it a little bit looser, where the Sustainability Review Council, I don't know their.
Sure.
The Sustainability Council. If you were to rephrase some of these questions as, tell me how you're supporting building reuse, or, someone mentioned like.
Strike the yes, no, maybe, and just like fill in the blank, what's your little essay about just not doing it? Yeah.
Tell me how you're,
Sure.
supporting public transportation. They say, oh, well, we added a bike rack, but in your design, you know that they're sitting on top of a 100-slot parking garage. You're like, probably not, like, we're not gonna
Sure.
recommend that. And I think it would open up, it would force the applicant to defend their decisions and give the review board a leg to stand on, where the applicant can't just say, well, yeah, we did, see, like, we exceeded the design requirements, but it's, by 0.1%. Whereas if you allow them to defend themselves, maybe you can kind of subtly push them towards the 10% that you're going for. And it would also prevent, someone brought up a concern about gaming system where, oh, look, it's all glass, but it has a huge insulator on top. That's harder to verbally defend than just a yes on a check.
That's a great point. I really like that.
I mean, and that will allow the Sustainability Council to have almost the same questions, but just by rephrasing it, yeah, they have to do a little more work to interpret the results, the responses, but it also gives them a weapon basically to,
Sure. Fair enough.
if it's open to interpretation.
Yeah,
they get-
I like it. I like it. I think, Steve? Yeah, no worries.
Then to build off that. And the Sustainability Council has a rubric. They say, well, if, get 1 point for this, 0 for a bike rack. But there should be a way for them to make whatever the incentive is, if they go either just through sustainability, or maybe they could go through affordability, or maybe there's different ways for them to get to whatever their incentives are. And my question was, do you think that sustainability is looking to us to decide what those incentives can be? Because like you said, maybe it's not just height, maybe it's relaxing some of the other code violation or codes, or relaxing some of the fees involved.
Yeah, like if they build a train station, do they get less park, are they required to have less?
Yeah, but
parking?
that's like a whole nother zoning question. That's like, so we're talking about, the only time we really interface with the sustainability committee, if I'm correct, is the height overlay.
Yep.
So that for us,
Well, for now, right.
yeah, so for us, they're doing a checklist that's
Yeah.
how, to have a whole other conversation about, which we have talked about, like you're kind of saying for the affordability issue. If you're in Philadelphia, does that, if you're so many blocks within a train, a bus stop or this or that, you can, you have incentives to get
Sure.
more height,
Mhm.
but that's not in the code now, so.
Right.
I think
and it
that's
also-
the questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we'll just stop this subject and
Yeah.
move on. But what I'd like to do then is, if Will is willing to, maybe invite him back for the next work session. And I think based on the conversations there.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he'll be able to watch the conversation. So based on that, maybe I would.
Not that Will wouldn't be here, but he also has sustainability.
Sure.
We have it would be.
Well, my thing is, I am just saying is I'm more than glad to have him back for a continued conversation and
Yeah.
whatever we can do to help.
My 2 cents, like I said before, would be that if you guys would just review and comment on the checklist, or we just use the minutes and give that to them, he can take that to his committee since he is speaking for a group, and then come back with their feedback and response. So
Okay.
that way it moves a little faster, which I.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we don't get a response from Tom Esty that takes my comments out. Because mine is, if Tom Esty the solicitor has to look at this, is who I'd like to get his feedback on.
Like I said, I emailed.
So
him,
that was my only,
But
yeah.
again, we can get his feedback as we build this, so I don't want to wait for one to do the other.
So are you suggesting you would like to see us make a motion of some type and move it along?
I don't think you need to make a motion. I would just
I think
request
it's
that
in
if
the
you guys have any response or feelings on, either of the checklists or
Sure.
any of the feedback that we've
Okay.
discussed here. If you want to send it to me in an email, or if you want
Sure.
to, that would be easy,
Well-
and then I'll pass it to Will to go to sustainability.
Sure.
And then
but
we'll
if you
schedule
could
him
send
for
me
another meeting
the-
here.
Your email,
Sure.
and then Jason, you want to send me?
I put in the minutes, that's all.
Just don't violate
Yeah.
sunshine and discuss
Yeah.
via email.
I mean,
We're not
Matt-
discussing.
Matt, did you?
I was just
did
gonna
you
try to
get the
get it
gist
so
of
you
what
have one copy instead of.
Well, you'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's,
I don't mind, that's what I'm
Okay.
here for.
I did.
Okay.
Or to John, or to both of us, to all of
Oh,
us,
he's gonna get them now.
yeah,
He's in both now.
yeah.
He went, moved right to
I
the
don't
top of my
mind emailing
email.
them. That way it doesn't violate sunshine in any way.
Sure.
Pretty much just send them right to me.
Uh,
And then no one
Fair
will know if somebody didn't care enough to.
okay. Yeah,
Keep your secret.
okay, fair enough. All right, so. Old business. Well, we have the approval of the March 25th meeting minutes. Jason, did you have any comments on those? I think everybody else.
no, I had none.
None?
No.
Okay. Seeing no comments on the March 25th meeting minutes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve those as written. Yep.
Aye.
You never are.
Say again.
Any citizen comments?
Oh, I forgot to make for citizens comments on meeting minutes. Robert.
Darryl,
Nelson,
Rob.
Darryl.
Yeah.
Okay. Jason, how you making out with the review of the build to ordinance? Next month? All
I
right.
have a question on that,
Okay.
because and I'm sorry, because I got your email late, but, so I have access to the archives of the zoning, which I was trying to look for. Do you guys know when it changed and what I could look in the archives, like what year? Because what you sent me were maps from 2012, right? So is that when?
Oh, the thing from Town Committee.
Yes.
I mean, well, actually, just to answer that question, I still kind of stand on what I was saying, that we go back to the old block class.
Correct, but I think you were gonna take those and just kind of review each one, make sure you're still good with what they said.
Well, yeah.
I think that, okay, so
Well,
mine
I'm
was,
looking-
how are you making out?
I'm gonna take a stab at that, because
I think it should be a setback. It should be back to the block class for the front or setback.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
there shouldn't be a built to.
I don't disagree with that for the
Yeah.
town center area. But however, I would like, if Thomas is willing to take a crack at it, I think,
Yeah, sure.
I think it makes a lot of sense with the other pieces we're doing that have that kind of dovetailed in and
I was
coordinated with that.
with Ray when he was doing that, and so he was explaining, this is the rationale and going through that. I think in the town center, like we've discussed, makes all the sense in the world, basically. I'd go back to the block class, essentially saying no setbacks, right? Like it's all built
Zero,
to
right.
lines, so I'm not built to isn't like matched.
It's a minimum setback. Yeah,
No setback,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then in the block classes, there were definitely discrepancies and I would like to take a crack at that in the fall,
Sure.
do some homework.
Sure. No, I mean, I think it should go back to the way it was.
In the old zone.
After last month and month before,
No, I think,
that,
I think what we.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
appreciate
find it, I just didn't know
A
what year.
mock, this is the draft, how we're gonna use it. Thought it would be a better.
I didn't know, like, if there was zoning code or codes that were amended, that you needed the archive
What did we
version
say?
of.
Sure.
So I had the maps that
I did?
have been provided, but there's verbiage from the old zoning class.
So that's why.
Correct.
Still have.
No, you didn't put one
But
together.
if I don't,
Okay, yeah,
why would I draft it?
Tom's gonna do that.
Okay, I'm not,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not.
just say yes, disagree with.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Yes.
Jason looks forward to seeing the draft.
okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so. He might have forgot that he,
I'm not sure,
it's in the meeting.
I'm not sure, yeah.
Approved.
I'm not sure we're not just going back to the old block class.
Well, not exactly. That, the
We were
point.
just we talked about doing a further review, so
Yeah.
when you had talked about going through
Mhm.
each of the different block classes in the blocks and just looking at, hey, how does that actually relate? It's really difficult, I think, with some of the modern zoning, like our new zoning map, because the new zoning map doesn't show building footprints. If you actually go back to the old block class, I think that's right,
Mhm.
right? If you go to the old block class plan, you actually do see they included the GIS building footprints, so then it's a little bit more clear, you can kind of look at that a little bit more clear. Which what Tom had actually suggested we do, he
Right.
said block class for downtown, but I think you as a group should work, charrette this
Sure.
and go through each block, because we're in a small town.
I think if you want.
No, we Yeah, so that was what we said we were gonna do. And then as we were sitting there,
Right?
like Tom brought all the map stuff and I was like, we don't need to do that.
Well, either way, I'll just.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't,
Thomas
we
has-
can just
Thomas
go
has
back to
offered
the
to do it.
old block class.
Well, I think that with tweaks,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so Thomas is going to head that up and we'll look forward to seeing that. A discussion of action regarding amendment hearing for HO 16. Oh, this goes to the ordinance that was written, so it's up there. And this one will be a motion
Oh,
and discussion. Thomas, do you want to talk before or after we review this?
Let's just do it. I think just be quick.
Okay,
wait,
this is
it-
real quick.
it's this, right?
Okay, go back one. That's it, right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so just again, as a quick review, one of those 6 items was an insinuation that Harb should review the building. This makes it a requirement for the building to be reviewed by a architectural firm or an architect with a background in historic preservation that's reviewing it and then providing a review letter. So there'd be somebody working on behalf of the borough, so it's assumed to be a compensated or a repaid consultant. So that's this ordinance. It includes, again, the ability and flexibility to provide either a firm or a person within a firm the opportunity. So I think the final draft by Tom Esty was reviewed. I like it, but did you want to take time to read that or anything, Jason, or you good?
Yeah, and we at Borough Council reviewed the ask last month and we were all for it. So,
Okay,
I mean,
terrific.
if there was wordsmithing done, you know, if there's anything major to call out, but otherwise, thought it was a good idea.
All right, so Ramsey's not here, but I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the draft of this ordinance as written, second by Jason. Are there any public comments? Daryl? Speaking on behalf of the public? Robert, okay.
I wanted to make a couple comments.
Sure.
I had, my concern with this, I'm gonna be yes though. My concern with this, which I voiced, last week, is that our intent is that, we have a thorough review of these buildings based on the HARP guidelines. All these buildings are have architects involved. Architects are kind of a dime a dozen, right? And, they're not necessarily going to know the HARP guidelines. So if our intent is the HARP guidelines, we all have a certain person in mind, and she's gonna do an amazing job. But if she were not able to fill this role, I can see this job not being, so the HARP, for example, has 7 people. We have a real estate agent that's been on the HARP for 15 years. He knows the history, he knows the architecture, and I would think, well, that person, who's not an architect, would actually be very well suited to this kind of job. So I don't want to lose, I'm gonna be yes vote, but I don't want to lose track of that. And so then I had a quick call with, Alan called me this morning, and he just talked to, Dale and Carol, just kind of giving the heads up, Carol, this is our dream is that you'll step up, for this. And, I think they said, yeah, that sounds great. And they just said we would need it would need to be clarified. This would happen, but, litigation. Sure. That just has to be
Sure.
obviously clear. And so it's just another part.
Well, and I think that's a fair enough point. I think that's what Tom's concern was and why he was looking from any applicant's opportunity to push back. And he was just trying to get as much teeth into this thing and credibility as possible. I like the idea and I don't have a problem if you want to add a statement relative to a familiarity with the HARP guidelines in the borough or with the borough.
So what I had suggested at the work session was, is there some way, and I think you were saying probably not the solicitor, to say, hey, you served on the HARP for a couple of years? Because it's a document that's not a checklist. It's all about interpretation. It's all about, precedent and things like that. And that's actually why Alan called me, is Alan said, hey, I'm concerned about this requirement as an architect, because Bernardin, look at what they sent us. That's
Well,
the
yeah.
architect saying
I'm gonna say is to be fair, it's specific with somebody that has experience in historic preservation. So,
As a point appointed by
Yeah.
the borough.
And then-
Yeah,
Like,
that's- so then-
we
That
pick.
was Ramsey's
something,
point,
like,
essentially, like,
yeah.
Yeah,
They're not gonna hire Bernardin to be the historic architect for the borough.
Somebody that we
Yeah.
feel can,
Right, I
if they
I'm
don't
pretty
know
sure.
the guidelines
Yeah.
well, that can learn them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an architect, right, like
Yeah.
you're gonna, you don't have to be on ARB for 10 years to understand the guidelines if you're an architect, right? You just have to know what they are and kind of study it.
Well, and I think that Thomas's point, there are other people, yeah, I think like Mike is as extremely knowledgeable individual that's on HARB that is a great resource and a great historian and a person that understands where and why things.
But I wouldn't want him being the borough architect.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe not. I guess I just wanted to, and I'm a yes, no, so just along with
Okay.
it. Just make-
Well, I
need to
think
make
it's
sure
fair enough
that-
to be added in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then I do think though, in all reality, the governing body or borough council is gonna make the determination of who.
Carol is gonna be excellent at this.
Oh, yeah.
We can get Carol.
Do we want to say, do we want to change it to borough historic architect or professional is not the right word, but or something else to give borough council the leeway to not appoint an architect, a professional
Actually,
architect?
it is in there. It is in there. So it's professional architect or a firm with professional architects. So I don't know if Carol's actually registered in
No.
Pennsylvania. So she would be working for, say,
They'd
whoever
have-
he works for now,
Well,
Yeah.
under the firm of professional architects. So it's covered. It's
Right.
covered. So Mike Walcott is talking about, right?
Yes.
If he worked for a firm of architects, then maybe he's
Sure.
kind of immediately, at least in
Sure.
the
Yeah, I
running.
was thinking of
It's a
the,
great point.
Yeah.
of-
So he's, yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what that umbrella was. The
Yeah.
firm
Mhm.
was.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It was geared around the Carol,
Yeah.
so.
right.
Yeah, it basically says Karen.
And Dale, obviously, yes.
Well, yeah, because I had that conversation with Dale and about him and or Susan, Dale and Susan, working with Carol.
Sure.
Bring the old.
Yeah, but not all these
team
people are
back
gonna be
together.
around, no matter what.
That's
So
correct.
borough council appointing it is the key.
Yeah, and it,
And
I think
that-
it control covers.
Yeah,
Those qualifications
yeah,
are fair enough. And
Yeah.
then solicitor approved. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and,
Tell me yes.
Aye. Yes.
okay, well, we're just
I second it, yeah.
Okay, so it's unanimous. So I'll get a letter out and the copy back to Borough Council then. Okay, Thomas. Nice. He's overriding you, Jason. Good move, by the way.
Oh, this might open up again.
I don't know. You know what's gonna be interesting? Is see how the camera likes this. Ramsey's not here, but on the video, do they see this screen? Or they just see us?
Oh, what was this, a Teams call?
Well, it was early.
No, it
The
was,
cursor was moving on its own, so they're looking at the screen.
Right, well, this was a test. This was a test.
Bill, can they see the papers, the presentation? See if he responds. Text me.
still
Yeah, I think when you put the USB in, for some reason, it locks up the screen.
We'll see.
I don't
Okay.
know. Guys have it for a while.
Put him to sleep. Who knows?
Yeah,
So I remember they did that. They did that last time with the USB.
yeah.
Oh, maybe I did.
Can you touch the screen?
Yeah.
Will that work? Like, try it. Just go nuts.
Folder.
Try one of the tabs up top. Yeah, I don't know what,
I'm gonna take this.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Then you put it into your, are you sharing your screen on here? Is that what this is?
This is the
That's the computer.
computer on the wall. I guess the best way to say that. And this is just the keyboard and
That screen does not work.
That screen does not work. How about,
they shut it off.
oh, they shut that off? But he
Yeah,
should be
so
able, we should be,
unplug it for a second, Thomas.
we should be able,
Of
we
what?
should still be able
Like
to,
what? See,
Thomas, we should still be able to read your USB though.
Yeah, can you just click on this guy?
right here. Wait, you gotta move over. I can't see. Yeah, there you go. That?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, I'm gonna focus and then maybe. you can do it with the,
Yeah.
So you have to get a USB.
There it is.
And you can maybe do it with.
Actually, are they doing it? Is he doing it? 'Cause that's not me. There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for some reason, it's like, it's locked here.
All right, where do you want to go?
The preservation ordinance?
Preservation ordinance.
Okay, then I should be able to click. I don't want him clicking through. Okay, so can you just make it full screen? And then I'll click
Now we're getting
through it.
ratings. Oh, fantastic. This is way better than Facebook.
About
Okay.
dinner there.
I got it now. Okay, so, we talked about this, last month, so this is just the 60-second recap. Just as a reminder of, you know, when we're talking about this ordinance in a little bit more detail, this evening, and we can kind of discuss it however we want.
Okay.
Ramsey has said that we can, present this borough council, so, you know, this gives us. So, this is just the recap. Yes,
Okay.
but it's, yes. So right now we're getting this. Ah, shoot.
Thanks, Jason.
Next.
Bill,
Call out to her.
next slide.
Yeah.
Oops.
I think Bill's better than Jason. I'm gonna tell you that right now.
Okay, though, this is what we all want to see built next. But when we allow townhouses, we get this on the left and not this on the right. Next. So we talked about, okay, we know what we want. The comp plan is really clear and pointing to that, but we actually have, it's illegal and we incentivize the other. We have, you know, that's our definition for contributing resources up there. We have a whole map showing our contributing resources in the borough, and yet we make it illegal to build them today. So generally, we're looking at, is there a way to start out with, maybe let's legalize it, but to some of the points we were talking about earlier with sustainability, if we know that that's what we're going to get, not the ugly townhouse from, you know, Lennar, but if we're going to get to that, then what would the overlay, you know, areas, setbacks and other things, what would be appropriate for that? Can you flip to the next slide? And, you know, like I said, we already have, you know, this historic district, I think, maps out what Ray Ott, you know, under his lead. That's all National Registry of Historic Places. So the districts already are here. If we wanted to implement them, you know, you go, oh, downtown, Harb, and then that, and then I threw this in there, you know, basic documentation. This is Philadelphia. I have this big collection of these. And we could document what are the contributing resources in our town. We already know. We also know the ones that everybody loves. So it wouldn't take that much to document that. And then you say, okay, first, let's make it legal to build it. Second, if you build this, that way we're not just opening up the door to like, okay, now you can do townhouses or skinnier townhouses, or do townhouses, then here's the incentive. You say, no, we actually know exactly what we're looking for. And we have great precedent throughout our borough. Let's do a little documentation. And if you build that, then, you know, you can approach this project differently. Next. So we're gonna end on this one, but for the discussion, if we wanted to, what I have lower down, actually, because you're here, maybe we'll do that. Just a couple of the recent projects looking at the like a project we liked, but the headaches it had to deal with, a project we don't like and what it could have been, and there's no one. But, so we were talking about preservation, and so I just wanted to put up a few points, and then also, you know, this would make more sense if it was part of other pieces of legislation, you know, like a little omnibus package where you're touching on, you know, because as you said, we have to think about the big picture. Ray comes in saying, hey, if we're serious about attainability, this is my attainability plan. And we're saying, whoa, that's going to be really bad from a preservation point of view, from an environmental point of view, some pieces of it, but we want to empower and we want to include it. So, you know, so here's just a few key points, and we could add to this in this discussion right now, right? So if we were to create an overlay district, there are environmental reasons, right? We talked about it tonight. You're here, which is an interesting thing. If you look at
More things as well. We'll meet her again.
Permanently.
well, yeah, right. But I'm throwing in this wall installation piece, and it's actually a really critical piece to sustainability and environmental standards. but you're not gonna find precedent for that anywhere in PA, removing a wall installation requirement, but that's completely possible within a borough. We can adopt the new 2021 standards and say, except for wall insulation. And one of the things that you end up realizing is that that's one way of controlling, the condition space inside of a building. But with most of these structures, air infiltration is actually going to be a bigger issue. And so then you start to balance out things with load bearing masonry, and you think about the long term. I'm in an 1850s house. We have a lot of turn of the century 1910s townhouses, and they're worth renovating and restoring. So
I'm working.
if you put it on, a longer time frame, you end up, there's more value to some of these masonry structures, and the insulating those masonry walls is actually detrimental to those walls, because you have the dew point, right? When the masonry allows water to come through. That's the nature of it. And it's actually a feature, not a bug. If you insulate and you're looking at, if you're not allowing the conditioned space of the house to push back on that water, you're going to end up with water inside of your wall system. And so where you see people, I don't know what Philadelphia would require for renovations, but here, most of our house, like my house, it's just plaster on top of brick. And because we heat the house, we can control that. And it's actually good when water gets in, it can also get back out. What you often find with, let's say, a veneer brick situation, well, I'm thinking of the weak holes at the bottom, what's the biggest killer of structures? Water. And so when you're, the wood frame system or a steel system is a tensile system. So you have room for that, insulation there, and it makes sense. But a very strong argument can be that if it were to be a load bearing masonry home, you check a lot of these other good boxes. Now, would anybody take us up on that? Probably not. Maybe. But it would be worth considering in a 2021 code update, just nixing that one. Yeah, I have more on that, but I'll preservation, that's key. Preserving the character of the borough, right? We're getting Burger King project as opposed to Burger King, which is behind it. Home ownership, obviously, like if we were to start to incentivize new small townhomes or just townhouses in general. We're currently, a lot of the stuff is illegal, and we're incentivizing the existing. We have existing incentives for the big rental artists. And then attainability, I think there is a key aspect to that too. If you were to take options off the table and you just say, hey, if you can repeat essentially a Darlington Street house, or if we can agree upon, which our comp plan does, we like these buildings, we like these streets. If you were just to do that, that simplifies the code approval process, that simplifies the zoning process. So if we had these kind of like pre-approved, basically, these are contributing resources. Okay, then this would just, if you were to have another ordinance that went with this, because the attainability side of it, you could have, say, a guest room ordinance that also, and Matt, you had outlined that a year and a half ago, but there's environmental aspects that using more efficiently the existing building fabric of the town. Preservation, would be my number one, because you're putting more, there's more building, business plan, your pro forma is going to work better if you're keeping the existing structures. I'm saying pro forma, but from the home, and you can tie that to home ownership, which is what Matt, you had said. Basically, if you're a homeowner, you can do that, and then there's going to be less incentive to tear down. And then there's the attainability aspect that with land speculation, if you tie this like a guest room ordinance to home ownership. So I think they all these two could be tied into hip. They make sense to go together, but finding some kind of putting together I think it could be a slim package. You could start with, here's this great townhouse everybody loves. Let's just see if who's the Burger King guy?
Pete says.
Pete. I remember he said, I'm not even gonna run a pro forma on this because there are so many, there's so many pieces of legislation against it. Can you skip down So this is an example of a project that we thought was appropriate, and we appreciated this one coming through. There, this isn't quite okay, this is, we kind of sketched out to kind of help them think it through a little bit. But, if this were to be, this is gonna be condos. But this could not be built as single-family subdivided lots, because even though this matches, and we were saying to the applicant, rather than what you're showing, let's look at the neighboring historic structures that we all love. And let's look at these structures here. These are non-conforming because they're under 20-foot wide, so that's the first one. They don't have the proper amount of off-street parking. They don't have the proper amount of rear yard. They don't have a bunch, though we have plenty of examples, like right here, a building facing the alley. We had in our code, if this was, you can't subdivide a lot so that a new lot faces an alley. So there are a bunch of things that would stop this from going through. Now, luckily they were able to kind of, the condo is a weird thing because you see people getting away with things, and it's like, well, you're acting like the building type is a use, because we say like the use is this, but I'm in favor of it, so I'm not gonna put too hard on that one. But it is a reality that we incentivize Pete Stas to put in, you know, however many stories are on a parking structure here, and yet this is illegal in a lot of ways. So I think most of the neighbors would rather see this than the Burger. Okay, next. Next. That was that one.
Thanks,
So-
Bill.
Thank you. So this is a great example of, you know, Rayot's development right behind the building that we're not looking for to being built. And very similarly, this has so many, you know, this is illegal in a bunch of different ways. You know, this doesn't meet our street standards. This doesn't even meet our alley standards. You can't build, you know, buildings fronting it, but it is actually contributing to the character of the borough. So let's figure out a way to make it easier for Pete Stas to run a pro forma and better a citizen builder, better a smaller person doing that, because it's gonna be different capital and it's gonna be somebody who cares, and maybe not that Pete wouldn't care, but somebody who lives here in town. Somebody who, you know, is accountable to everybody around them and cares about it. Next. And so I just took, okay, here's Rayot's great little development. You know, if it had been an option, you know, Pete said, okay, I could put some townhouses, yes, facing, you know, High Street here. But it's gonna be there's gonna be so much red tape if I were to try to, you know, come up with a more, you know, interesting plan. So I just drew this up for this presentation, just looking at, I think all the neighbors would prefer to have 37 single family homes. Is that more than they would maybe want in an ideal world? Maybe. But this would be, you know, a rich little connector of little pedestrian scale streets like this. You could have tuck under parking. Is that my favorite? No, but you know, it would allow for a Pete to run another pro forma. This is a lot simpler to build from a construction point of view. His cost per square foot would be a lot lower here. You know, when they're building these units, it's a single, you know, bedroom unit, but it's still probably close to $500,000 because it's so expensive. But they're running these numbers and, oh, I'm gonna make another, you know, $500,000 if I do it this way, I'm gonna do it this way. If net,
Yes, you could phase this.
running a pro forma on.
You could
there.
phase this in smaller chunks of construction too.
Will you do that for you, even though it's not quite?
No, I just.
like,
just
oh,
got it
No,
across.
but what, can anyone run a pro forma on this idea?
Yeah.
Just to see what the
Yeah.
first would.
Well, I think the first thing is it's not legal.
No, it's not
Exactly.
legal, but
So
the
that's
question
that's
is,
his point.
yeah, you know, the question is, it's not legal, but is it if it was legal, would it
Sure.
be? would
Is
it
it
work?
comparable?
Yeah, yeah,
I would
exactly.
say,
I mean, it'd be good to run it, because I don't think.
It would be
necessarily
good to run.
I don't know if it would necessarily be cheaper, because there's a lot of site costs compared to the
Well,
building. costs. You're
I
just
think, well, my.
you're just throwing building costs into site.
It's still not about cost though, as much as that there's a delta for the developer.
Yeah.
I mean, can he yield more out of this? He might be able to. Can the borough yield more out of this in the long term? I would say yes. I mean, I think the scale and the approach on this is significantly more consistent with what and how the borough had grown over years.
And long
Good.
term.
Oh, it's completely better, but yeah, but.
Long term, like, I appreciate Pete's investment. We all appreciate the I think most of us appreciate the investment in the borough. You know, it's great. The density is great for our downtown. John O'Brien came and supported this. But it's a living document. We could say, hey, I think we have enough. Is this a reasonable, could somebody run a pro forma on this with the land costs and construction costs and rent costs / sale costs? Let's just, yeah. This makes sense to build. If you can put the big donut on top, I don't know if those.
Big
Pete's
donut?
building might donut, it's like wings, you know, so it's like around 40 years.
Like
Oh.
Chuck,
So here, it's,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
where it's a ring of units
Yeah,
and
but
then
if
they.
this were legal, let's say you couldn't do Pete's thing, this would still be worth building, probably. Yeah, it's not like this is.
But I think step one in that is how do you make something like this legal?
That's right.
And then how do we
Yeah,
get that
yeah.
integrated in and center, so the borough understands a lot of problems come out of just bad zoning, all right, no offense
You
to.
get what you don't for.
All right, but
Yeah.
but what we're stuck doing is saying, is this meeting or not meeting your zoning? And we're going, unfortunately, it's meeting our zoning. So the reality of is where it has to be kind of chipped away at is the zoning. And so at the same time, that diversity of that change of that, the opportunity for height to happen is not, it shouldn't be off the table, but maybe that needs to be relooked at and how and why. I think why is a biggie. But projects like this, I think, are much more appropriate, would be much easier, better received by the neighbors.
I mean, Nicole, before you were on council, I think I was chair, and that was the one thing I kept saying, like, I would talk to people in council, and I just kept saying, like, we don't have any zone, like, we can't, like, why can't they build more at Darlington Street? We're not allowed. And then why can't we, I talked to Pete the same thing about this, and, you know, the zoning doesn't allow developers to take this is a unique plot, because it wasn't even subdivided, right? It was already one big lot. So people walked into it, if they, you know, whoever bought it was gonna think of it as one lot, not broken up, and they'd have to reverse subdivide it. So this is an interesting case study where it's like, you got one giant lot that you immediately can put a big building on that zoning allows. And then everybody lost their mind that they're doing what the zoning allows. So the developers are looking at the crowd and going like, we're allowed to do this by right. Now, there were small arguments within, are they by right? But they were allowed to do that by right. So then everybody else is like, well, they can't do that. It's like, well, yes, they can. So we have to change the zoning. Like, you can't complain to us now, being the planning commission, to say no, because the zoning makes it very clear that they're allowed to do that.
And I think
So
so often, you know, we have these other rules and requirements that make. You know, if all you do is legalize the narrow, a townhouse, there are so many other ways of doing these townhouses. But we are surrounded by so many beautiful buildings that we could point to and say, as a borough, and our comp plan tells us to do this. We want to see more of that. How do we get more of that? And so then we're not talking about, oh, I'm gonna reduce massing everywhere. I'm gonna reduce parking everywhere. But if you were to say, if we were to get another one of these beautiful little buildings, would it be worth saying, oh yeah, you only have to one off-street park spot? Absolutely. Let's incentivize the buildings that we like and are contributing to the character of the borough.
So I think that leads to you, which is the whole thing was to how and what can we do to encourage homeownership, to encourage this scale type of development, and we're adding the other pieces.
So I'm gonna put my work hat on as a project manager, and I'm gonna say, what's the timeline on this? How long will it take you to flesh out some of these ideas that you're bringing tonight into something actionable by borough council that can then be actionable by developers? We're basically May right now. Is there?
I think next month it's introducing the idea, all right, and
Okay.
understanding that this is, and I think that's that presentation or part
Okay.
of that.
Yeah,
I see a vice chair saying, why, we're against the clock.
Yep.
Because I remember banging, like, getting all frustrated that we weren't following hard guidelines before, when none of you guys, I mean, you had already been, and maybe some of you guys already been on it, but
when it was a whole different group of 7 people back here. And he was doing this really ugly building over there and saying, I see it in there. He has to follow HARB guidelines and was like, and our former building and zoning officer said, sit down, Thomas.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was saying like, it's up to the applicant to write the review letter.
So and that, to answer your question, we've already actually started to do that. So we've addressed the height. That part of that was asked for by
Yeah,
council,
last year.
but we've addressed the height. We've started to talk about the build to line, which I think we actually are there.
Brought up the HARB just to say like,
Yeah, the hard
And-
thing, we just
sure,
finally did the.
but
hard
it took us like 4 years and we're
Yeah.
getting 3 or 4
Yeah, I don't
more
want
ugly
this to
buildings.
take 4 years.
No,
This should be,
Well,
Yeah.
we should be able to move forward with this so quickly.
this one's almost as easy as when we just did hard
Exactly.
2 months ago, and I said, we're gonna just say it needs to be mandated.
Yeah.
And then we talked to Tom Esty, and so the minimum lot size of 20 foot wide could be reduced to 16.
Do you want to do that across the board though, or do you want to say, if you build buildings that reflect contributing resources?
right.
Because if all you do is narrow the lot size, you're gonna get Lennar coming in
Yep.
and they're gonna be incentivized to do different things. One of the beauties of making it contributing resource is Lennar can't do that. Lennar does production buildings and they're not going to be interested in having to build something that's beautiful,
Yeah.
but we want something beautiful.
Right.
So
So
you
you're
have to
saying
like
there's
tie
a,
it
so you're saying
into-
there's an overlay district of areas that you can make, it doesn't have to be an
I
overlay
think
district, but you're, where
like
you need to
the
make
way the-
conditions.
the map.
You're just saying, put conditions on a less than 20 foot
Is that-
wide lot.
And it would be
Nicole, is that
really
Bill one? Can you go for the
easy
map?
to just say,
Can you go
we
for the
can
map?
always expand this, right? But you could
Oh,
even
go
put
to the
it
map, Bill.
on the applicant to say, hey, you have to show us that you're imitating, you know, these.
Keep going up,
Resources.
keep going up.
One more.
His name is Bill. And we have to ask him. Bill, move up to the map at the top of the presentation.
And I thought it was Siri.
Wait, go back.
Not this one.
Down. One more,
Everybody's phones are.
One more.
Yeah.
one more.
There
There.
you go.
Thank you, perfect.
So I just wanted to.
Thank you, Bill.
point out with this, that we do have these districts already.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think, you know, what do we use a historic district for? We actually don't.
Right.
Ray brought that on. To your point about timelines, I think he brought that on in the early 2000s or something. To say, hey, we're really concerned about preservation and we want to limit demolition. And there is actually nothing that's tied to it. Right?
I was just gonna say, that's not Westchester.
So the downtown historic district, well,
That is.
it's really the heart.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say it would be interesting to consider this maybe with our already historic districts rather than the use districts, because this is really more of a historic thing than a use thing, right? And so if you wanted to keep it just in the, you know, commercial or town center, you could say, okay, just to not rock boats, we could say, okay, this is an option in that area. And then later on, we could include, you know, all of the historic district, or we could start with a historic district, you know?
Yeah.
But we could incrementally do that, and I think it could be a simple set of design drawings.
Let me ask you a question. When is Borough Council turning over?
At the end of the year, but like.
End of this
January,
year.
There will be.
Okay, so why don't, we can work towards trying to get something before then. But
Yeah,
I think what we can do is, in the same way that we are trying to approach this, I think we draft that up and then we comment back on that. So I think, yeah,
Okay,
I'm gonna say is we'll try to do it as quickly as we can, but here's a lot to take into consideration.
I know there's a lot of, it's not so easy,
but
but if you put pen to paper,
I mean,
you know.
Yeah.
I don't actually think it is that much.
Well,
And
that's,
zoning is a
well, that's
pretty.
great.
blunt
Well, all I
tool.
was trying to do was leave you enough room that you didn't feel like you had to have it by Friday. So mine is,
Friday sounds
Good.
great, yeah.
Friday would be perfect.
Yeah.
Now mine is to be fair to you.
Sure.
And I think the
Well,
approach is, yeah, my approach is, I like how when you lay something out, it's a better starting point for the conversation. And I think you take that first draft through, just like you already have. And then we have those discussions in that. And so mine is, I do think within a couple meetings, I'll just say 3, or something, just to make a.
You'll have something.
We should have something that we could at least move forward.
But you'll, that other presentation.
We're gonna
that-
have this
that-
basic,
Yeah.
basically this one with a
to
little
say,
more,
This is where we're headed,
Right,
and
and
everything's
that-
gonna be like, this is
that
great,
one's-
we want it sooner, and so
Right.
then.
correct, that one's next month.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I,
Right.
yeah, 2 weeks.
I think we should be able to
Yeah.
have something following month. I mean, Thomas has thought this through. He has the list.
Well, I think
Sure.
we'll all think
And-
through, it just seems like to Jason's point, like, I like Jason, how you're just like, let's move forward on these
Right.
things.
Let them
And-
tell us.
And, you
what's
know,
missing or what's
maybe,
not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just doesn't seem like there's that much to it. Like, look at a use overlay, it's like a half page.
It's all, well, yeah, like you said, it's already there, so.
Oh, John, real fast.
Yeah.
Before, there were some other issues here. I just want to say, there's a lot of out-of-date stuff in the borough code. So at some point, we can add that to the list of, you look at things and it's referencing 2003, 2005. What's that? Yeah. So anyway, I can point out those sections at some point, but I didn't want to wait till like another month or so, but there's a whole lot. If you're just looking at it like you're a developer and you're coming in, and you're saying, what am I complying with? And you go, and you have to go through that portal and you get into that piece and you look at it and you start reading it. It's like 2003, 2007. I'm like, you know what? I think we're beyond. So that needs to be flushed out and updated somehow.
Yeah. I've never proponent of actually putting in date, I should say. As
Latest.
100% agree with that. And then, yeah, okay, so that's fair. And then the other thing was, it was relative to codes and stuff. 2021 kicks in on July 13th. So remember, we were talking about how they're kind of 3 years
oh,
behind.
yeah.
So they have 24.
Oh, the 2018 one is.
We're in 2018.
2021.
Presently, 2018's in.
Okay.
The state of
Might be
Pennsylvania's,
conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, Pennsylvania's going to adopt in July 13th this year
Yeah.
of the 2021.
Okay,
Everything kicks up to 2021, even though 2024 is out there.
uh-huh,
All right, so. So
but at
just-
least we're closer to the
No,
current year.
We're
than
100% up, we're on point right now. Just, that's where the state is.
Right,
When the state moves, we all move with it. So,
okay,
Yeah, so back to sustainability, it's like,
But we do have the
it's
opportunity
pretty,
to address, because
Correct.
we're Westchester, we could say, unless it's a Barry Masonry structure and we know that this is detrimental, and so there is
Sure.
room to
But
do
thank
something like that.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
nice to meet you.
Nice
It's
meeting
great
you.
meeting you, John. Thanks.
Yeah,
So I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So I'm all done.
Okay,
Yeah, Great.
thank you, Tom.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
So anyway,
Love it. I feel like council.
I
fully
don't,
support.
yeah, I'm pretty certain that, I mean, there might be questions and this and that, but I think the concept is something that everybody's on board with.
I think most residents and most council would be in favor.
Yeah,
And I would just also point out that the
Yeah,
comp plan talks about it throughout the entire thing.
yeah,
So like, we actually have a directive that
Mhm.
has been collecting dust for a bunch of years.
yeah, I mean, and we voted on, to your other question, like
Sure.
it was voted on for us to tell you guys to work on this, right?
Right,
Like that
right.
came up
Yeah.
and we went through the
Yeah.
process.
And then.
You specifically made sure that we worked through the process.
Process.
You like process?
We should.
So I think the other thing, Nicole, was within the comprehensive plan, there's an official map. The official map is
Uh-huh.
where areas are identified for potential
Okay.
bigger picture stuff. So,
Not this-
so as an
yeah,
example,
the official.
the
map is-
present, it's called an official
Yeah.
map. So there's a zoning map, there's a historic, there's, I'll just say there's a dozen different types of maps. One of them is actually literally called the official map. The official map identifies potential areas in the bigger picture for use for the borough. So if, say, for instance, you want to take an area and call it a park later,
Uh-huh.
as an example, the area that was Wyeth or down there near Neo's where Eli Khan purchased,
Mhm.
that was identified in the official plan. All right. And that spot below, was it Neil's? All right. That parking lot across the street,
Yep.
that was identified as a potential public works building or expansion or potential.
Really?
Yeah, it's not anymore. It's now owned. All right. So if someone didn't stick their guns to that one, I'm just saying is that official map is extremely important. We learned that relative to in our,
You just went to the zoning class.
yes, we did.
Yeah. That's
I
it.
wanted to go to the zoning class. but
Yeah,
like-
it was good. We learned a lot. We got a
It's
fantastic,
totally worth it.
absolutely unbelievable report.
You realize that there's like an underlying,
Yeah, I think
Under
it basically gives the borough preferred land for sale.
Sure. Yeah, and then, but the thing is,
well,
But the
golf
thing
course
is, it
another-
may
golf
be-
course is official
yeah.
land.
and I would not suggest we redo the comprehensive plan, because that's thousands, tens and tens.
It's like, that's a great point.
Yeah, but I'm,
Most of what it says, we would probably still, like.
yeah,
read it.
but my only-
We haven't been executing on.
but my only point was, it may be though, that we want to offer some tweaks within that, that's all. So there's some amendments within that, so that it kind of steers away from where it was 10 years ago and into closer where we want to go.
We did not.
You know what my key
That was 26.
project like this is to
This'll be
figure
good.
out how to lift. It's 2025, not whenever they put, basically, they're holding that huge chunk of land, which is the size of our downtown. It's 9 blocks worth of land wide. And Pfizer is holding it captive because
Right.
they can make more money by saying, I'm just gonna put a deed restriction on your land. We're a 1.8 square.
Wait a minute,
Right.
I thought we approved the plan for it's still being held? Is that what you're saying?
So, I mean, Pfizer put this deed restriction on it
Uh-huh.
because it was easier to do that than clean it up. And so then, what's to say, it's just this strange reality that if you own land, I could, buy, like downtown, put a deed restriction on, I can't do anything there. What are you talking about? That's our home, that's our borough. And so it was cheaper for them to do it this way than to clean it up. And it's, and so then they're like, okay, I guess we're just gonna keep the zoning for it to be Pfizer, but it's 2025. Those things improve. My dream, so I'm dreaming now, is that we figure out a way to lift that deed restriction, clean it up, and then look how many blocks could be in there. It's a beautiful area.
The red,
We already approved the plan for whatever warehouse will end up in
Oh, yeah,
there.
he can make more money selling houses. If you were able to turn this into residential blocks.
Is that another Pete one though? That's-
No,
No, that's Eli's.
Okay, yeah.
Eli, if they could turn it into residential, they would, but they can't do anything on it right now.
they were concerned about legacies, lawsuits, anybody coming back at,
well, they can't do anything because of the deed restriction.
Well,
well, that's what I'm saying.
But lawyers
That's
can
why,
figure out-
that's why the property has, well, the other thing is, like Thomas is saying, if they lifted it, or if they waived it and were relieved of any,
that's right. This is under our watch,
Yeah.
We're supposed to be proactive here, and the last thing we need is Amazon warehouse.
well, and I also think that's fair enough that there's other properties within that area. I don't care, if it's a Dewey pile, but it is some sizable, so I like the idea, but I mean, it is a significant, percentage if it's just a parcel. I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably the biggest one.
Oh, so,
So,
okay, that's my,
but anyway,
that's.
I like your dream. Yeah, and it's the same thing is, most stuff is driven by dollars and market demand and,
That's right.
and then, the individuals that are able to have made their moves, have the capital, have that. But meanwhile, and that's why my concerns are, younger people, individuals or couples trying to get that foothold in, that's what they're competing against. They're competing with somebody that has billions of dollars behind them,
Jim,
cash
that's what
purchases.
what's so valuable too is clarity. So if you had something back to that, observation, if you had historic buildings that you could say, the zoning is really clear, the building codes are really clear. If you want to build this, we're gonna use that. That's worth a lot too, because time is money and that's worth a lot to have a clear path forward for the developer, to be able to run that pro forma, raise the capital on that, and not have the hiccup of, am I gonna get tied up in lawsuits because the neighbors hate it so much?
Fair enough. Set that example too. All right, let's see here. I wanted to raise out next month's meeting. Again, it's one of those funny ones. I'd like to move it back to the Tuesday. It was scheduled for Monday, May 19th. I'd like to move it to Tuesday. I'd like to go back to what the planning commission procedures said, which was the 3rd and 4th Tuesdays are when our meetings are. From a scheduling standpoint, it is,
Then advertise first. You'd have to.
Well, presently it's on Monday, but
Okay.
that's previously, we had 2 Mondays that were canceled because of holidays. This one's not, this one doesn't fall on a holiday, but my only point is, it.
The primary is on May 20th.
The
So
what?
I think that's why Borough Council also moved our meeting to Wednesday and Thursday. So that was,
I saw you guys with the 22nd.
yeah, and that is why we moved to the Wednesday, Thursday, so that people can go and vote
Okay.
here. They vote here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well. Okay, I'm not gonna be able to make that 19th, Jason can take it. So,
Yeah, I
What's
would,
on the agenda for next month? Anything hot?
well, I'll tell you what's floating back
Like
around there
applicants?
is the Westchester University Campus Master Plan, which is like a 15-year thing. And then, I wanted to be able to have in work sessions, some conversations because of preliminary reviews. We haven't seen review letters from our consultants at this point. I did get a letter, Ramsey, dropped it off last week, which is the fact that we've received it. We're waiting for our consultants to review, the engineers, the planners, traffic consultants.
Oh, for just the master plan, okay.
So the master plan, I mean, when I'm looking at it, I'm just gonna say, while we're here.
He probably wants that so that.
They
he
want
can
it-
also read, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
They want a recommendation from us next month?
yeah, that's what I said at the last meeting, that he needs a recommendation for council from planning commission by the end of May because they're out for the summer, so council needs to discuss.
We need to get back to.
Okay, so are you saying we should not wait for any letters from our consultants? We should just make comments? Because next month is May, so,
Yeah, I'll see, I don't know.
and I'm not gonna be
When
able to
they
make that.
sent it to everyone, so I would assume that any consultants would have a review letter by the next planning commission meeting, so,
Well, that's May.
right.
So we're here to get their letters and make make a comment.
So is your thought that they have the information by end of May for Borough Council to review in June? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, so does that make more sense? As opposed to having it for Borough Council meetings in May, it's to have your comments by end of May for Borough
But
Council.
maybe you can't, I wonder if you may get Tom's comments and then send them on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be most fair if we had a presentation by the applicant. So somebody from the borough, somebody from Westchester University or their attorney walk through. I mean, I read through and I kind of understand what's going on, but I think it's an awful lot there's a lot, tens and tens of millions and stuff. And I'm most concerned, not necessarily with what's going on within campus, but there's areas that are impactful to the borough. That's where, their creation of a super block, all right, the purchase of those additional properties. That was probably something as a conversation, talk about preservation, what's gonna happen with that? If that goes away and becomes a 7-story dorm, we might be very saddened by that. So some of the areas I was concerned about were the intersection of High and Rosedale. Every one of their plans puts it in the corner and it's completely ignored, all right? Even though if you asked most residents when they're driving around or through or past where they're crossing paths with the students, it's that intersection, but that intersection's not even addressed, not talked about. So to me, it's maybe there was studies done previously or not done previously, but not in the next 15 years are we gonna see anything. So yeah, so that's why I'm saying I want to hear from Kelly, I want to hear from Tom, I want to hear from Nate, so if I don't hear from them, we can certainly, I'm not sure how the stuff within the campus, that's the state. It's sort of like an embassy, you know what I mean? Inside the campus is the state. There's some things they're doing are really good. I like they're cutting off Church Street, so there's no through traffic there. It's turning into a cul-de-sac that drops off across Mitchell and the parking lot. I think that's smart. I think the 3 new dorm buildings on
Like that
campus.
from a parking standpoint?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Okay,
Cut off
they're
the
they're
Church
taking
Street.
down Lawrence Hall. They're putting up a large a dormitory. They're taking down Killinger and they're putting up 2 buildings. They're expanding on South Campus as well. So when I'm looking at these bits and pieces, most of them are on campus. Some of them they're all very good and we need them to lift the burden or take on some of those increased housing demands. They have a 5-year permit on that parking lot on South Matlack. So Darryl, you've been down to West Goshen's meetings. They have that 5 window. They're not going to make that 5-year.
Yeah, part of that too, just because, like, I think what's it, College Arms, is that the place on the corner of High and Rosedale? Aren't they already remodeling that or something? Maybe that's why it's not in the plan. I think part of the reason they've got the Matlack Street
Yeah,
parking lot.
but what the
To-
impact is really a pedestrian crossing the street. The students and that light and that timing. It's not really the buildings. And they did
Oh, you're talking
include,
about the,
I'm
that
talking
plan.
about, I'm talking
The
about what's of
project
concern or
plan.
what should be of concern from the borough is all the edges where the university is impacting the borough. So, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying is when I'm
needs
looking
to
at
be
this
talked
thing,
about.
it's not an addition to a home that it's 5 feet over the setback we're looking at. I mean, this should be something that we should hear from the applicants and what they're actually trying to do, especially, and that's what I'm saying, from Sharpless down High Street, you're looking at that and saying, hey, we want this, which is fine, I guess, or not, right? But I'm saying it is, or not. So
I
mine
think,
is,
I think it's really gonna be hard to recommend approval without,
right, I get to
that's
hear
the
from
point.
them. Yeah.
I think,
Thank you, that's the point.
right?
Thanks, Matt.
Without comments
Yeah.
and responses.
How do I not have a presentation? How do I not
presentations,
have
questions,
comments? How do I, what am I review? And we have to do it by May.
which presentation do you have? Do you have the long version or just the short version?
Well, the presentation, I don't know what presentation, I have 75 pages on that.
Yeah, we have a big
Okay,
PDF.
I have yeah.
There's about a dozen submittals. One of them is about a 75-page master plan.
Okay, yeah.
And it breaks it down over 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15 year, all right? And then it throws a projection out there.
We have all the appendices. I mean, I think we have.
Oh, I think we
Okay,
have,
no, it sounds.
we
like
have you and Cole's
I've
work.
only seen the like 10-page version or
Oh,
whatever.
no, yeah, no, we have a
Yeah.
bigger one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that's a lot to take in and digest. It would be, even if we broke down, hey, this is happening in the next 5 years, but I wouldn't want to 10 years from now say, you guys agreed to this.
So that said, though, we do have a time limit, right? Like we, we borough need to get back to Westchester on this plan by August.
Sure,
So if you can't get through all of it by June, by June Borough Council meeting, like, do we need to take this apart and do it in chunks? Again, my PMO,
well,
do a lot of phased
I
approaches.
like,
to
I like
things.
it. No, I think that's fair enough, because I would say
They're phased
everything that
approaches.
exists inside the campus that makes that campus more accessible and pedestrian, I like. All right, so, and I don't have any, and I don't really have too much comments on that.
Trying to have some kind of phased approach to feedback.
Right, I don't have any, it's like I said, there's stuff on South Campus, it's not even in the borough, so we're not gonna really address that. But there are things that, like bus loops and things that we should go, hey, where is that? What's that used to happen here, now what happened to it? Because we're cutting off Church Street, right, and then turning that into pedestrian way, they're now funneling a pedestrian path which into a big expansion on Sykes. So they're doubling the size of Sykes towards Church and entering in from a pedestrian side there. That adds another section. So that section in Rosedale, all of a sudden is going to have students interacting with a resident. Now, anybody that lives here probably avoids Rosedale in that area during the school, but
Yeah.
but I'm just saying is there are other people, the ones that don't wear patience hats that wander into the borough. And then they're all of a sudden like, why am I in the middle of the campus? And mine is go around the borough. But so to me I see areas and I'd like to just understand, is there a bridge going over the street? Are you
So-
doing a tunnel under
So
it?
is your request to have someone from Westchester here in your?
I saw Brian
planning commission
Nagel.
meeting?
So I just emailed Sean to find out, and Wendy to find out if these have been sent out for review and if I can get the consultants' letters ahead of time. I'm sorry, Harper, interrupted you.
All right, that's
I also asked if we can have somebody present at the next planning commission meeting, that way
Sure,
they're,
Answer
you guys
your
can-
question.
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's kind of it. And then to answer more of your question is probably could do chunks of it. I mean, it does work on a 5-year windows.
We just need to get back to Westchester by August on everything. How we approach that you know, that there's potential ways to approach it differently if it makes sense from a workload perspective, but the goal is not gonna move to get back to them by August.
I think it's fair enough for the planning commission to be able to provide a recommendation in July, all right? Because that gives us May, June, July.
Yeah,
To the
but
borough.
council still has to go through.
Oh, they have
So
another time.
they
period?
have to have something by August, right? That's
That's
why
the-
May was
my
after the
understanding.
planning commission. But what I will just say is that, and I'll confirm with Sean and the solicitor, but maybe if you guys go through it in May and you feel like there is a lot that you need to still digest, that maybe we look into having we advertise a public meeting that's planning commission and council together, that we advertise properly, that you guys can workshop it together with the applicant here, if the
In May.
timeline is too
So in,
rigid.
can
but I would
we
say
move
start
it,
May.
can we move our planning commission meeting to the 22nd then and make that a work session for a combine?
I don't. No, I mean, I wouldn't I think you guys should attempt to go through it in May, stick with the meetings that you have on the agenda, start there. And then if you
Okay.
guys aren't through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't clear. I have a zoning hearing board on the Monday, all right?
Sure.
And then, so I was asking, can we move it to our normal Tuesday? That would help me out.
There's the primaries are here, so we can't
Sure.
have it here.
And then I said, can we move it to the combined work session? If we were gonna have one, which is Wednesday.
I don't want to discount your participation as chair, but I think if it's already.
Well, I don't need to,
You're
Jason
saying
can handle it.
can you move the planning commission meeting to Wednesday, the 22nd?
right.
I mean, that's, I guess, up to you guys. I guess
And-
technically
You
you
have to
can.
re-advertise.
Because,
So
Oh,
there's an
well,
advertising.
what's the window on what, I'm not sure who came up with this schedule. But the planning commission's procedures stated out what our schedule is. And then that's all over the place. It's not consistent with the procedures. So then now as we're seeing months coming up, we're like, why is the meeting over here? Why is the meeting over here? It was so much simpler and predictable to go, hey, it's the third, fourth Tuesday of every month.
Yeah, why doesn't that
But-
happen?
It got changed by somebody, not us.
I thought that's how all the meetings.
It used to be.
I think there was a conflict with other
Somebody,
meetings, because if Kevin was required to be here and it was also on a council meeting night for smart, then he could not do both at the same time.
He moved it and then he was like, I'm not coming anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
He moved it.
Well, my request is I'd like to go back to something that's that predictable schedule wise, so that we can continue to,
I don't think there's an issue with that, but I do know, like.
because right
you guys
now it's
should
a
get your
month,
schedule
it's a month from now.
Year or this year, because Dana sends it to every liaison.
Okay,
to
well-
the commissions.
Well, the only
So,
way I see it is to
down
go
there.
on there and go through month by month. I don't have an overall schedule. That has not been provided. So I go through online, that's the only time we're finding out.
Didn't we do
Yeah,
that
I
in
mean,
January?
they're
We did it
advertised
in December and January.
at the
But
beginning.
we
of the
went
year.
through each month.
We could probably get her to send it to us.
Yeah,
We did, but then it got changed.
Yeah,
It's
it got
official
changed
from the
again.
borough.
Yeah, it's not,
We didn't get.
but
a
and
copy
since
of
then,
our-
we've had 2 meetings canceled because of that. That was not our doing, all right?
the 19th, like, yeah,
The
without,
previous 2 meetings were canceled on us, all right? And then so it stops momentum going when we're not meeting.
Yeah, but you guys canceled the 19th because there wasn't gonna be a quorum. That was the reason, because I was here and that was why
I don't-
I didn't cancel it. You guys said to
We
cancel
don't,
it.
yeah, we would prefer to.
That was my
So
first.
I'll start back
I
over.
think
I remember.
There were people that couldn't make it because of St. Patrick's Day, so it wasn't
So the
Yeah.
reason behind this one in May is because somebody, whether they should have reviewed it with you or not beforehand, that's another question. But they probably looked at the schedule and knew that the primary date was on the Tuesday, which was your usual meeting
Yeah.
time, and they shifted it to the Monday and. Wow.
I'm fine not being here in May. It's unfortunate because I like the subject. Now, but my request is, can we shift the rest of the year so it's consistent with our procedures, Tuesday?
I will try to I'm looking for the advertisement. The only issue that I think there is if there is a conflict, like if John or myself has to be here, we can't be in the committee meeting that we're also required to be in, which I think is why it was shifted. But I do think I will find out why it is set up the way that it is, because I can't figure out what council meetings are or my committee meetings either. Like I just go when the schedule says, because I don't know.
Well,
What is
council
the
meetings
last-
are the third week.
And then we're just.
And they're usually, yeah, and then the committee meetings are, yeah, the second week.
Everything's based off third place, what would you say?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I still just look at the calendar. I feel like I can't get a handle on it.
So since May starts on a Thursday, that's why it feels late, or, because because there's no Wednesday for for May, it starts, so it's like the latest that anything can
Right.
happen, it's like one of those. And then you've got
Jim, I'm just saying, that I just got my
June.
through that week, absolutely see
Sunday.
a presentation on this. This is, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and mine
Where's
is,
the bigger master plan?
It's in the document center.
I found that small.
So you're
you might be able to find them.
you're typing away.
I'm just emailing Dina to ask her for the
Oh,
copy
okay.
that had
Big screen.
all of this set up, and then we can look at it, see if
All
it's
sorts of
feasible.
phased plans with,
Okay.
then you go, holy
And it won't
limited.
conflict, because that
Yeah,
would be
yeah,
council, I think,
Yeah.
is also. like,
And then,
one of
like I said, I don't care what happens on, but when they're
Yeah.
thorough, I got questions.
100%.
Right?
I mean, also, right now, what kind of land is
I don't.
paying some taxes.
It's on tax, it's on our, correct. And it's still, I'm just gonna go back to the preservation standard. Those are older, nice twins along there that, I'm not saying that they're being
Yeah.
taken care of as
Think that.
well as they could be, because they've mostly turned into,
But
but they could be, it should be
And that's why.
preserved. I like the scale of that. That's when you're coming into the borough. That's what I like to see. And that's a much better interface. And then behind, one layer back, you can see those big, tall, 7-story dorms, and that's fine. But I like to see that along the street.
No, I think May. What's June's like? Bill, can you go to June, please? So then
Yeah, that's right.
June, you're Monday and then Tuesday. Are you
That's what I'm
usually
talking about.
Mondays?
Right.
Okay. So June is also Monday for the
Oh.
work session, and then Tuesday for then, July, please. Then the work session is Tuesday and then Wednesday for July.
Yeah, Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah, I
There's
don't
no
know,
obvious reason why it was
No.
Monday, Tuesday.
not in
Yeah.
June, like,
Well, the whole year's kind of been that way, so. All I'm saying is, for the previous, just Tuesday was significant. The rest of us, I mean, we work in other jobs with priorities, and then I'm just trying to just
make your life work.
continue to remember to keep those windows option, and I have other obligations that are outside of, they interfere. So I have a zoning hearing board testimony on Monday, and then I go, I think I'm sure, fine, then I get off it's disappointing. Nope.
Yeah, it did, it looks like it goes back and forth, like August
It does
goes
go
on
back and
Monday
forth.
too.
Yeah, so I said, I flipped through enough to go, I can't figure out a pattern.
I think it's supposed to be Tuesday, but it looks like the weeks where work session and voting sessions are Tuesday, Wednesday, it moves to Monday.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because.
So
all
that
have to
we
be
could
there for
get
that.
there, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my request to the borough. Okay, let me see here. Westchester University campus, we don't have to touch on that one because we just did, but I'd like to hear back, I guess. And then are we relative to Sunshine, if we're not, I guess it'll be easier once you give me the time frame to understand how we might have to proceed.
I mean, like I said, Sean told me that's what I said at the last meeting,
100%.
that May.
I get it.
A recommendation for
But
council.
mine is we might have to call an executive or a special whatever meeting to get together and hear something from these guys.
Oh, sure, yeah, because that's important.
To hear from them?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna see if they'll be at the next, I'll see if they can make it to the next meeting.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
And you're concerned because you won't be here.
we
Well,
will record it, and so, yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, it's this. Okay. All right. So, codes. Okay. Anybody else have anything on open issues? Ms. Shimoni, you're here.
I'm here, and this has been great conversation. And as I said, when I got here, I am not going to hold you hostage with additional commentary and requests from me, just because I happen to be here. But anyway, you addressed a lot of it anyhow, so it's been, I'm glad.
Okay.
to-
Well, we really appreciate you joining us and your direction and support. So, okay, so that being said, Matt, Thomas, Jason, Steven, anything? Okay, we're gonna call this to a close then. Bill, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
David did confirm what I thought, that
You
Sally
are
has
welcome, guys.
scheduled the work sessions on Monday nights. If the planning commission work session fell on the same night as the council work session, get the info. So that's
That
why.
was logical.
Yeah.
That was, it would have been nice to
Right.
know that logic, because maybe I would have also been here a little bit more.
Yeah. I will make